Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan from the Rocks and Stocks News Show. They've got another of our interviews with executives of mining companies, and I've known Matthew for a long time, and he's the corporate VP Corporate Development and IR for Premier Gold, or Premier, your old company, i-80 Gold, and thanks for joining us, Matthew.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, Allan.
Well, usually we get Ewan on the horn when we do these interviews, but he's in transit, so we're glad to have you on the show, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks a lot. The next best thing.
Well, there you go. And I was mentioning to somebody that Ewan is a serial entrepreneur, but you've been with him the whole ride from the Wolfton days. Wolfton took over, then you spun out Premier Gold, and Premier Gold got taken over, and now you're spun out assets into i-80 Gold, and you're doing it again. And I see that this is going to be the biggest winner for you and your team.
I hope so. I agree. Seems to be one of the best opportunities I've seen since I've started in the industry. It's been really exciting to grow these assets and focus on one state, one jurisdiction. It's been quite the opportunity for us, for sure.
Well, in a short period of time, you guys have accomplished a great deal. We'll get into that, but today what the topic is the news that you guys put out from Granite Creek. I'll just give the highlights of the drilling: 15.7 grams of gold over 6.6 meters, 13.9 grams over 4.6 meters, 23 grams over 5.3 meters, 8.5 grams over 5.6 meters. Included in that was 10.9 grams over 2.3 meters, 9.9 grams of gold over 11.9 meters, and included in that was 18 grams over 4.8 meters. This South Pacific zone just keeps on returning tremendous grades and mining thickness.
Yeah, it's been quite a wonderful discovery to have been made. Recall we upgraded our drill program there from 20,000 meters to 30,000 meters on the back of the discovery of the zone, and it still remains wide open along strike to the north and at depth down plunge. And then we also secured the extension of what we call the range front fault that the deposit sits on to the north. So we've got even more land secured for future drilling. But it's a very exciting target. It's going to be a material increase to our resources by the end of the year, or Q1, probably when they'll be out in the public. But it's been quite the opportunity to be drilling that such high grade deposit.
And what really stands out to me, and Ewan and I have talked about this in the past, the importance of continuity. In fact, your VP he mentioned that in the news release. And you look at the historical mining that was done, then the OG, and now the South Pacific. It's kind of like forming a wedge that's, as it gets further to the north, it keeps on going, and inside of what you've already drilled is tremendous continuity.
Yeah, that's very true. Continuity and rock quality gets better as we get down to depth and into South Pacific, so it makes mining a lot easier and a lot more efficient.
Well, and the reason that it's so important is if you sort of get a bit of high grade here and a bit over here and a bit down here, that really doesn't make a high grade mine. And maybe that was the problem that the historic mining ran into, is they didn't drill it off quite as importantly as they should have. And you guys are drilling it off and getting tremendous continuity.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, the previous operator didn't have the cash to be putting in a big drill program, it seems, and it became our opportunity to drill it out properly. We're putting in the levels ahead of mining, so we'll have lots of opportunity to be pulling ore. The goal is going to be to have 5 levels in the OG automatic peak side, and then we're going to drift over to South Pacific right away and hopefully start that drive by the end of this year, and put 5 levels into South Pacific right away to give us sort of 10 opportunities to be pulling ore to get that sort of 1,000 tons per day out of the mine. So we're we're certainly thinking of this project being a long-term mine, and we're setting ourselves up for success in the future.
Well, the drilling certainly has suggested that. And what I've also noticed is as it's getting longer along strike, it's also, as you go deeper, you're getting higher grade. And so the depth is wide open. And then what's really exciting is the potential to keep going to the north. And not far from that is a pretty important mine.
Yeah. Yeah, it sits on the same fault contact as Turquoise Ridge. So they're just probably 7 or 8 kilometers to the north of us. So on their property, they're calling it the Getchell Fault, and on our property, it's the Rangefront Fault. But it's the same fault unit that goes right through the Turquoise Ridge mine, and that's a 20+ million ounce deposit that Nevada Gold Mines is operating on. So we're certainly hunting for a deposit in Elephant Country. It's been quite the opportunity.
And you're hitting it in the same kind of geological setting, the same fault, the same kind of rock. And so there's lots of reasons to be fairly waving your arms to the north there.
That's correct. Yeah, we're hitting it in the lower Comus Formation, which is similar rock type that they're hitting at Turquoise Ridge. So, the recipe is there to find more ore, and we're certainly going to not stop with the drill bit. We'll be pretty aggressive going forward to grow that resource as quickly as we can.
And that truth machine keeps on pointing you in the right direction, right?
That's right.
So I think it's fair to call this a world-class gold project on its own, which could be a company maker on its own. But you guys, in addition to the Ruby Hill, or in addition to Granite Creek, you've also got tremendously exciting stuff happening over at Ruby Hill.
Yeah, that's right. We're hitting all sorts of type of mineralization there. We've got the Ruby Deeps, which is the classic Carlin type of mineralization that will go eventually to the Lone Tree autoclave. But interestingly enough, the last 6 months or so, we've discovered some base metal opportunity, and it's really sort of changed our view of the opportunity what Ruby Hill has to offer us. We've opened up about a 1.5 kilometer corridor of untested structure, looking for high-grade CRD mineralization, and it's been very exciting. And I really don't know of another project out there drilling these sorts of grades and thicknesses, as a new discovery anywhere on the planet right now. So it's been quite the opportunity for us. I think that whole Ruby Hill district is going to really get invigorated, and there's all sorts of companies along that trend that are actively exploring as well. And I think we're really onto something quite interesting.
Well, what also excites me about Granite Creek and Ruby Hill is that, we talk about the Lassonde curve in the mining business, and, there's two kind of waves of enthusiasm. One is when something's found, the other is when it goes into production. And because of what you have, you're able to narrow that Lassonde curve. Instead of 7 to 10 years of development discount window, you could narrow that development discount window down to months, which is quite exceptional, being able to access what you found.
Yeah, we're on a path to grow our business to, the target is 400,000 ounces in the next 5 years is sort of the goal. 250,000 ounces in 3 years is what our internal targets are. And we're trudging along to meet that guidance. One of the things that really sets us apart in the state is the ability to process our own ore. So we acquired the Lone Tree autoclave, as you know, and we'll be putting out a retrofit study on that in the fourth quarter of this year to demonstrate what it would take to get that up and running. And in the meantime, we are building 3 mines at the same time to feed that autoclave. And then we've got the base metal opportunity and the mill at Ruby Hill that we're looking at potentially restarting as well, with either oxide ore or turning it into a float plant. So the opportunities for us are really endless on how we execute on our plan and how we develop our company. It's been quite interesting.
Yeah, well, McCoy Cove there has a very handsome grade as well. It's like you guys only look for the high grade stuff. I like that. High margin.
Yeah, grade is king. That's always been our mantra. Even at Premier, we try to find high grade deposits.
Well, and getting back to Ruby Hill, what really excites me about that narrowing of the Lassonde curve is the Archimedes pit gives you easy access to the the 426 zone that's right beside that pit.
That's right.
And then that's sort of in the middle of, you got the pit, you got 426, and then Ruby Deeps. So you've kind of got an easy path there to, because of the historical work. So ease of access to the mineralization is tremendous as well.
That's right. And then keep in mind, we discovered the 007 zone, which is parallel to 426, that same elevation. So that's right in there as well, and we're drilling that off. We believe that to be another oxide type deposit similar to 426. And then on the other side of the pit is kind of Hilltop starts right around there. So it's that structure the Hilltop's on. So the Archimedes pit has certainly provided us with opportunity to get to these deposits quickly.
Yeah, and that's so 426 and Ruby Deeps is to the west of the pit. And then as you go to the south of the pit, that's where you've hit the CRD. And, you know, the historical companies that had this were focused on the gold. And I mean, who cares if you've got 500 to $1,000 a ton rock? Who cares what kind of what metal you're getting out of that? That's what's important to a mining company. And this CRD thing looks tremendous.
I completely agree. I think we will one day change our name to i-80 Mining versus i-80 Gold, I would suspect, as we continue to grow our business. And just to add to your comment about the previous operators, not only were they looking for gold, but they were looking for oxide gold. So the Ruby Deeps deposit, which is sulfide, is wide open, and it's and there's several. I think we drilled 5 generative targets this year, and we've announced 007 in the Hilltop, and there's other targets that we're following up on as we speak. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's a tremendous project. I mean, to think that right beside a pit, you've got oxide, you've got sulfides, high grade, right beside the pit on one side. On the other side, you've got a CRD developing, and I don't think people really understand how big that could be. You've got the right plumbing system with the faulting, the cracks in the earth that allow the fluids to make their way up. Then you've got this package of rock that's permeable and allows those fluids carrying the metals to then spread out. And as it spreads out, you've got the most important part, which is now you're hitting grade, tremendous grade at that.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, it's going to be a district play for sure. It's the best project I've ever drilled in my career, I would say.
And the package of rock is, you've got a lot of area there to look at with the faulting, the secondary faulting. So you've got the plumbing system, you got the right sponge of the rock, and now you're just starting to get into it, and you're finding tremendous grade. So I did it when a previous interview I did with Ewan, he showed us a picture of the Taylor deposit size inside of, and you could fit a Taylor deposit in there quite nicely. And that was a huge winner for Arizona mining.
Oh yeah, it's, you look at what our neighbor to the south, Paycor, the company's called, they're drilling the FAD deposit. That's about 2 kilometers south of us, and they're drilling very interesting grades on their property as well. And about 1.5 of that 2 kilometers is completely untested and on our property. So we'll be systematically stepping out and drilling to the south to understand how that fault, it's the East Archimedes fault and the Jackson fault, I think is what they're called, and how they how they perform to demonstrate CRD mineralization.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Paycor because and Arizona in the same breath, because Arizona Mining, Jim Gowans, who is part of the Paycor team, and I did an interview not too long ago, and we talked about that same story of the plumbing system, the sponge of rock that allows the fluids to make their way up, and they've got a nice amount of that right story as well, and they're hitting. So it's reasonable to sort of wave your arms over a couple of kilometers, two,
Oh,
3
yeah.
kilometers there between you guys. Well, just on your property alone, maybe a couple of kilometers, and then, they've got the right story on theirs as well.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's more than a couple kilometers, but the truth machines will tell. That's the way you put it.
Because if you start at the blackjack and you go to the limits of your claim, that's over a couple of kilometers, right?
Yeah, 1.5 kilometers, but I think we believe actually mineralization will go north of our property as well, and we're testing targets up there. And then if you look down below Paycor, there's a series of other little companies that are drilling very interesting mineralization. So I think it's a very large district scale plumbing package for CRD and gold mineralization. So we're certainly watching everybody pretty closely.
Well, and that brings up the subject of when you find a system, you want to understand the power of that system. And if you've got that kind of grade and the thicknesses that you've had, that speaks to the power of that mineralizing system. That's
right. Yeah. There's got to be some sort of large heat engine at depth, and we just need to find it.
Awesome. Well, I'm a big fan of that Eureka district. I've been fortunate enough that Ewan made me well aware of you guys, Paycor, Golden Lake, and Timberline.
That's right.
And they're all sponsors of my website, so I'm able to put out a lot of content. And what excites me about being able to put out that amount of content, Matthew, is that I think that this could be the next important district in Nevada, which is already a tremendously exciting jurisdiction. But if you sort of have a lot of investor focus on this area, and I think those 4 companies in that area, led by i-80, I call you guys the elephant in the room. For me, as reporting on mining exploration, it's a lot of fun for me, Matthew.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting district to watch over time, and when we don't intend to slow down on our drilling. We're going through our next year's budget, and Ewan's already telling our exploration manager there to just keep drilling. We'll use next year's budget if we can. Let's just keep going, and this is too important to stop on. That's kind of his view.
Why don't you give us a bit of a rundown on that then, Matthew? So are you finished with drilling at Granite Creek for the time being, or are you getting right back in there?
So Granite Creek, we're finished, and what's going to happen now is we are putting the drilling results into an economic study. So it'll likely be a feasibility study and probably a PEA as well, depending on the density of drilling at South Pacific, because we want to include as much of that as possible. At the very least, it'll be a resource update. So that's what's happening at Granite Creek for the remainder of this year. At Ruby Hill, I think we're on hole 60 today or something like that is what the quick log showed, and we put out 20 holes so far. So we've got a lot of results still to come to share with the market. And then we're submitting our budgets for next year, and we're looking at following up on existing zones and looking at more generative type targets as well on the property, just to get a good handle of what the system there looks like.
So it sounds like you're going to just keep drilling at Ruby Hill area.
Yep. Yeah, we'll be drilling the base metals and drilling off the Ruby Deeps and 426 and 007 zones for sure, and then probably some smaller regional exploration programs on the top of that.
So you've got a heck of a news flow ahead of you there, Matthew.
Yeah, we've been averaging kind of one every other week at least, so it's been very busy.
I know, because I keep on doing these shows with you, and every time you guys put out news, so it's great that you guys are a sponsor of my website, because I love putting out good news about good companies, and I really when I look at the industry out there, to be able to find a company with a $600 million valuation that I can see based on the drilling and the results growing into what I think will be a multi-billion-dollar company, to be so early and be able to crank the keep people well informed of how things are evolving is a lot of fun for me.
Well, really appreciate the hard work you're putting into it, Allan. It's been much appreciated on our end as well.
Well, you guys are making that job pretty easy with the Truth Machine. Well, and we kind of get focused on Granite Creek, which for a while looked like would be your flagship, and now all of a sudden Ruby Deeps and Ruby and the CRD makes that look like now maybe number two. It's a hell of a number two. But then even you look at McCoy Cove. McCoy Cove is very exciting, and that goes back to what you mentioned earlier about having that facility as a central hub and then being able to develop these mines around that processing facility.
That's exactly right. That's the plan. So McCoy Cove is we're drifting down to the deposit as we speak, and we intend to start drilling off the Helen and Gap zones in detail by the end of this year. To be included in a feasibility study on those deposits. The property is a very large land package. I think it's around 40,000 acres or something like that, and it's relatively unexplored regionally, other than the McCoy and Cove pits. And underneath the Cove pit is actually another zone, a polymetallic zone called the 2201 zone, that we don't even include in our PEA or any of our public data. It might be in one of our resources, but it's something that is kind of down the road, and it's at depth in a lower rock unit. So we'll address that once we're underground mining.
So you've got all the tools or the equipment you need there to become what you guys envision.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And having this base metal discovery and this plant at Ruby Hill, I think could materially increase our production on an equivalent basis if we're able to execute on this base metal deposit. So, once your autoclave is full, that's kind of what you can top out in terms of ounces. And with the second plant, there's some pretty interesting growth opportunity for us if we're able to execute on a base metal plant at Ruby Hill.
Yeah, that's very exciting too, because now you can keep growing, maybe even beyond what you guys envisioned when you did that checklist earlier in the year of what you want to accomplish. Because let's face it, if you've got high margin material there, it doesn't matter what metals. The bottom line doesn't care what metals coming out of there.
That's right. The biggest companies in the world aren't just gold companies. They produce all sorts of different minerals, and we've got big aspirations.
Well, you've been kind with your time, Matthew. Do you want to? You've been at a lot of conferences lately. You must be busy at those conferences.
Yeah, it's been a busy year for sure. It's full conferences. I think between Denver and Beaver Creek conferences, I want to say we had about 70 meetings or something like that. So it was a very, very busy week and a half. Lots of interest in what we're doing. Unfortunately, the gold space is not cooperating at the moment, but we have a longer term view, and it's long term. This is even medium term. We're very bullish on gold, and we're excited about what we're working on and the value we're going to create.
Well, you and I have talked about the gold price, and we're on the same page. And I think that turnaround's coming a lot sooner than many people think. This whole year has kind of been a battle between the U.S. dollar gaining strength with the interest rate increases, and it's not because of excellent economic situation. It's simply because of the raising of interest rates, and I think that party is getting to be over. That if the U.S. dollar comes down, I think it's going to be very good for the price of gold.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, and you're starting to see some cracks in the system already. The UK, that stuff that's about happening in the UK last week, it's showing you that things are not going well, and what do you want to be owning right now? And for me, it's gold.
And then you look at Australia. They only raised 0.25%, so they're kind of starting to pivot.
Yep.
You look at some of the commercial banks, Credit Suisse, UBS, Deutsche Bank. They're all looking like they're having issues. And if you look back at 2008, China, the precursor to 2008 was that asset-backed commercial paper blow up about a year before 2008. So I'm seeing you kind of see the cracks in the overall system. And then, well, how long can the US keep doing what they're doing before they have cracks as well? And so, that sounds to me like a pivot is not that far away for the US Federal Reserve.
Yeah, I agree with you. I completely agree. Yep.
Well, I think we've got good times ahead for gold and good times ahead for i-80.
Appreciate your time, Allan. This was wonderful. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah, well, I used to do all those conferences myself, and we used to talk all the time, Matthew. I miss our conversation, so I'm kind of glad that Ewan was on the road today and we could catch up.
Anytime. This is great. We should do it again.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe I'll get you and Ewan on next time.
That's
So
right.
I'm going to close things off. Thanks for joining me, Matthew, and we can have a chat at the other end.
Perfect. Thanks, Allan.
So there you go, folks. I started by talking about how Matthew and Ewan have been together for a long time, a serial entrepreneurial group. They had success with Wolfton being bought out, spun out assets to create Premier Gold. Then that was bought out. Then they spun out assets into i-80 Gold. And now I think they're building their biggest success in the history of this group. And I don't think that's arm waving. Just go into their website and look at the series of news releases that the company has made since going public shortly after the spin out. It's not me speaking, it's really the Truth Machine speaking, and what they've been able to put together, the group of assets. Ewan made the point last time we talked that just the valuation alone, it would cost you more than that to get something like the autoclave that they've got. And so, the group of assets is really not being reflected in the price of the company. And I think that this is a cornerstone holding for investors that want to have access to a gold mining, a high growth gold mining company of the future. And I really like the potential for processing or mining base metals as well, because the grades there make that rock very valuable and high margin potential. And that will lead to a lot of free cash flow. And when you have a company with a lot of free cash flow, those are the companies that get premier pricing. So do your homework. Check out my YouTube channel at Rocks and Stocks News, because you'll see a bunch of interviews there with Ewan. Go to their website, check out all their news releases. They do a great job of explaining what they're doing and their corporate presentations. On that note, have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.